Hi folks, welcome to part 4 and the final part of our tutorial series for F28 Professional. In this video we will be covering descent, landing and shutdown procedures. Now that may sound like a lot of procedures for one video, and it is, but we are now more familiar with the aircraft and we know the general areas we should be looking at now for controls and switches, so it should be more of a streamlined process from here on out. As always, we continue where we left off. In this instance, we're about 30 nautical miles inbound of the Alpha Bravo Bravo VOR. Once passing over the Alpha Bravo Bravo VOR, we'll start a track outbound towards the Charlie Lima Mike VOR, and we will begin our descent. Now that we are within range of the Alpha Bravo Bravo VOR, we can press the nav 2 button on the remote datum selector to track the inbound course to the VOR. This then frees up our VHF nav 1 radios for the Charlie Lima Mike VOR, so we can input a frequency of 112.90 and a VOR course of 150 degrees. Once we are within 5 nautical miles of the Alpha Bravo Bravo VOR, synchronise the heading book with the aircraft's current heading and engage heading mode. Rotate the nav 2 course on the remote datum selector panel to 150 degrees and engage beam mode. The aircraft will then track the outbound radial from the Alpha Bravo Bravo VOR heading towards the Charlie Lima Mike VOR. Once the outbound course has been captured, we can now begin our descent. So first we can set 3000 feet on the altitude pre-selector. And begin the descent by engaging indicated airspeed mode and retarding the throttles to approximately 80% high pressure RPM to maintain a 1000 feet per minute descent down to 25,000 feet. We can now begin our descent checks, so set the fasten seatbelt signs to on. Rotate the cabin altitude point up to the field elevation of Parasauri, which is 287 feet. Set the top temperature control switches to take off. We can then confirm our landing speeds using the speed reference card. If the flip chart option setting is enabled on the AFB, we can directly click on the flap 42 speed to automatically set our landing speed routes. However, if this setting is not ticked, click on the speed chart will automatically set the landing speeds for the current selected flap setting. So in this instance, that would set the landing speeds for the flap 0 setting. We can now set our decision height to 200 feet using the set knob at the bottom of the radio altimeter panel. As we descend through 25,000 feet, slowly retard the throttles to idle and the aircraft will pitch down to increase the descent rate to approximately 2,000 feet per minute. If the landing gear warning horn sounds, this can be silenced by pressing the undercarriage horn silencer button on the pedestal. The Charlie Lima Mike VOR should come into range once we are approximately 40 nautical miles outbound of the Alpha Bravo Bravo VOR. Once the secondary DMA displays become active, press the nav 1 button on the remote datum selector panel to track the Charlie Lima Mike VOR. We can now tune in the ILS course and frequency for runway 25 at Parasauri. In the VHF nav 2 radio, enter the ILS frequency of 111.75 and a course of 253 degrees. For additional situation awareness during the approach, we can also tune in the Papa Oscar Yankee NDB into the ADF1 radio by entering frequency 334.0. As we descend through 10,000 feet, engage pitch mode and extend the speed brake so that the speed decreases below 250 knots. Once below 250 knots, engage indicated airspeed mode and retract the speed brakes. We should now be approximately 15 nautical miles inbound of the Charlie Lima Mike VWAL with Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport off our right wing. Rotate the heading book to 210 degrees and engage heading mode on both the mode selector and flight director panels. We will now begin a right hand turn to the intercept point for the ILS approach. With the VHF Nav 1 radios now freed, we can input the ILS frequency and course into the VHF Nav 1 radios and press the approach button on the remote datum selector panel. The approach mode allows us to have an ILS frequency tuned into the VHF Nav 1 radio and a secondary VOR tuned into the VHF Nav 2 radio, which is on the missed approach procedure. In the event of a missed approach, this means we could then press the Nav 2 button and the flight directors would direct us onto our missed approach course. With our radios set, we can now run through our approach checks. So we'll set the no smoking switches to on. We can check and cross-check the altimeters, confirm the engine anti-icing switches are set to auto, and the airfoil anti-icing switches are set to off. We can then turn on and extend the landing lights. As we prepare to intercept the ILS, we can arm both beam and glide modes. With these modes armed, the autopilot will automatically intercept and capture both the localizer and glide slope beams. As we pass through 5,000 feet, engage pitch mode and reduce speed to 200 knots. Use the speed brake as necessary. As we level out at 3,000 feet, confirm our speed is less than 200 knots and we can select flaps 11. With flaps 11 set, we can now reduce speed to 160 knots. Rotate the mode selector switch to glide slope auto, and the flight directors will now provide guidance to the approach. The autopilot's now captured the localizer and begins the right turn to line up with the runway. When the glide slope indicator on the HSI indicates one dot above, we can select gear down. Note that the landing gear extension takes much longer compared to retraction. This is due to the hydraulic pressure supplied to the landing gear being much lower during the approach phase of flight compared to takeoff. Once the glide slope is captured, select flaps 25 and reduce our speed to VREF plus 20. We can now carry out our before landing checks. Confirm the landing gear is down, with 5 green lights illuminated and all red and amber lights are out. Perform a skid control test by holding the skid control test switch to the outboard and inboard positions and check the skid control light illuminates. Check the brake pressures are within the green band ranges. We can then arm the lift dumpers and confirm the indicator on the glare shield shows ready. At 1,500 feet above ground level, select full flaps and reduce our speed to our VREF plus 10 speed. Disconnect the autopilot by pressing the cutout button on the control wheel or by using your assigned control assignment. And now we just need to keep the aircraft on the glide slope and localizer beams and ensure our speed does not decrease below our VREF plus 10 speed.
Flight slope.
As we cross over the threshold, we can select speed brakes out and reduce our speed to our VREF speed. We should only need a small flare as the aircraft enters ground effect. And touchdown. The lift dampers will extend automatically, and we can apply gentle manual braking using the rudder to keep the aircraft on the centre line. Once the aircraft has slowed, we can then take the first available exit to the right. Once we are off the runway, we can come to a stop and carry out the after landing checks. These checks would usually be done once the aircraft is taxiing to the gate, but we'll just come to a stop for the sake of simplicity with this tutorial flight. Okay, we can switch off and retract the landing lights and strobe lights, and switch on and extend the taxi lights. On the APU panel, set the main switch to on and wait 10 seconds for the APU inlet door to open before then pressing the start button. Select speed brakes and lift dampers in and flaps up. Turn off the airfoil anti-icing and engine anti-icing switches. Turn off the pitot and vane heating switches and confirm all 4 amber caution lights are illuminated. Set the Gen 3 switch to on and confirm the generator 3 inoperative light is extinguished. Set the weather radar and transponder to standby. On the autopilot controller, set the yaw damping switch to off. Set the gust lock to on. And test the engine fire warning system in preparation for shutting down the engines. We can now taxi to the nearest available stand. As we turn onto the stand, we can switch off and retract the taxi lights. Once we have come to a complete stop, we can set the parking brake to on. Set the high pressure fuel valve levers to shut down the engines. Set the fasten seatbelt switch to off. On the air conditioning panel, we can set one main switch to off. Set the APU air switch to on. Turn off all fuel booster pumps. Switch off the nav and anti-col lights. On the AFB, we can now insert the chocks. And we can either open the doors via the AFB, or we can move into the cabin and open the doors from there. The aircraft is now ready for passenger deboarding. Once all passengers have deboarded, we can now power down the aircraft. Set the APU air switch to off. Set both windshield heating switches to off. Turn off both master radio switches. Ensure all cockpit and external lighting is switched off. Set the emergency light switch to off. Set the generator 3 switch to off, before then shutting down the APU by pressing the stop overspeed test button. Once the APU begins to shut down, we can turn the APU main switch to off. Finally, allow 10 seconds after switching the APU main switch to off to allow time for the APU inlet door to close, before then setting the battery switch to off. And with that completes our tutorial flight in the F28 Professional. We really do hope that this series, along with the PDF manuals, were useful tools in getting you up to speed in the F28. As we may have mentioned one or two times in our pre-release marketing, it really isn't like any other aircraft to fly. Full of quirky systems and procedures that takes some time to get used to. But as with everything, once you've been through these procedures a few times and you start to get a few flights under your belt, it all starts becoming a bit second nature. So on that note, we'll conclude this series with a big thank you to anyone who's made it this far, and we hope you thoroughly enjoy our F28 Professional.